I'm going to go a little bit about what inflammation is, and I'm going to move very quickly to some of the factors that can aggravate inflammation. And I'm going to focus most of the talk about how to fight inflammation. I cannot fit every single thing that will fight inflammation on this talk, so I've chosen probably substances that have the most research and that I think are easy for us to incorporate in our in the things we eat. So what is inflammation? You know, when we talk about inflammation, what is it? So I'm talking about chronic inflammation. We all know that acute inflammation is what we get when we fall and hurt our elbow or our knee. Our knee or elbow becomes red and swollen, and that's acute. That lasts for a few days, and then it's gone. When that sort of same process happens inside the body, in our cells, in our blood vessels, that is what we call chronic inflammation, and it tends to last months, sometimes years. How do you know you have inflammation? There are some symptoms that can make you be sort of aware that that could be what's going on in your system. So whether it's chronic fatigue, whether it's anxiety, whether it's frequent infections, whether it's weight gain, sometimes even weight loss, insomnia, you know, any of these symptoms that I put around, those are symptoms that have been thought to be perhaps a sign of inflammation. Now, I just want to say that these symptoms could happen for other reasons. So you need to work with a practitioner so that you can uncover whether this is because of inflammation or something else. So inflammation is important because this chronic inflammation is at the core of most of our chronic conditions today. So whether you think of high cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, inflammation is at the core of all those conditions. So if we can bring the inflammation down, it follows that this will improve as well. What we eat and how we eat really influences inflammation, but it goes beyond diet. We know that social isolation will trigger inflammation, especially in men. That's what the data says. And even beyond that, exposure to toxins, chemicals, lack of sleep, lack of exercise, they all contribute to that chronic inflammation we're talking about. I want to talk a bit about sugar and how sugar can contribute to that inflammation. So I'm going to talk a bit about fructose. So fructose is what we also call fruit sugar. So fructose, as well as this sugar, have been linked to higher inflammation. So just a bit about fructose. So this is sugar. So this sugar is what we call sucrose. And sucrose is actually the combination of fructose and glucose. All right? So this is the fructose that I'm talking about, that is part of that sugar. There's also fructose in fruits, that's what's called fruit sugar. And there's fructose in other things like honey or high corn fructose syrup, right? High fructose corn syrup. So why do we care about blood sugar and why do we care about fructose? Well, let's talk about sugar first. So blood sugar, when your sugar levels in blood go up, that triggers the formation of these chemicals called AGEs. They're glycation molecules. So that means sugar molecules, so sugar products. And they're toxic. They are inflammatory to the blood vessels, the nervous system, the heart. And when I think about inflammation, just think sticky. You know, your blood vessels are sticky. Your heart, things are not functioning. There's no smooth, right? There's a stickiness in them. Even the small blood vessels in the brain. This blood sugar can do all those things, which is why you want to keep your sugar down. High blood sugar by itself can also cause low immunity in the system, so you get more infections, and can cause fatigue just by itself. Let's move to fructose. Let's talk really about fructose now. So again, fructose is that part of the sugar. We find it in fruits, including tomatoes. But the problem today is that we find it in other things that are not just in nature. And in these other things, we find it in very high quantities. So it's not so much that fructose is bad for you. It's not that if you have a tomato or an apple or an orange, it's a bad thing for you because they have fructose. It's the amount. So the studies show that if you keep it to between 25 to 40 grams of fructose per day, that you will keep diabetes at bay. There are some clinicians that will even try to get people to not even more than 10 if you're trying to lose weight. Why is that? Well, when you get fructose in your system, fructose, the only way it gets metabolized is through your liver. And what fructose does is actually creates fat in your liver. So you heard the term fatty liver and how in this country we're getting into an epidemic of fatty liver. That fructose causes fatty liver. So it's not only an issue of how much we consume in our diet, it's a problem with how much fructose is now in different products. So I mentioned high fructose corn syrup. There are studies showing that the high fructose corn syrup we consume today, that is in packaged products, is actually higher than what they used to be years ago. So you have more fructose in the same high fructose corn syrup. So you end up with more fructose even when you have the same amount of high fructose corn syrup. In addition, some studies have shown that many labels will not disclose that they have fructose. So that's another issue, right? So all these foods are the ones that are thought to be really high in fructose. So I don't want to get you to and look at pears. You know, pears have 9 grams for every cup. That's not a huge amount of fructose, right? Look at a 16-ounce soft drink, 28.7 grams of fructose. That's huge, huge. I'm telling you, 25 to 40. If you have one of this and yes, a little bit else in your diet, you're going to end up to having those 40s, right? Fruit juices are pretty high as well. A 16-ounce glass, which hopefully many of us don't drink, even if we drink juice, is 37.2 grams of sugar, of fructose. That's huge, huge. So it's adding all those things up that really is a problem. Sweetened fruit yogurt, right? Another source of fructose. Gonna go back to this advanced glycation end products, those AGEs. I think it's really funny the way they call that AGEs, right? Like age is bad. Okay, watch out. So there are dietary AGEs. So there are things that we consume that will contribute to inflammation. If you keep AGEs low, they will improve inflammation. The study comes actually from people who have diabetes. Now, processed foods are high in AGEs, and that's because most of them are heat processed, and that heat processing causes these AGEs. So anything you buy that is ready to eat, breakfast cereals, cookies, snacks, because they're produced with these high temperatures, they create AGEs. Okay, so this is why they're inflammatory. People talk about how processed foods are inflammatory. That's why. We also find AGEs, AGEs are higher in animal-derived foods than in plant-derived foods, all right? So just in general. But even with your animal-derived foods, there are ways you can actually lower the amount of AGEs that are going to be created. So if you cook with moist heat, you shorten your cooking time, you cook at low temperatures, or you add a little bit of lemon juice or vinegar, you're going to lower those AGEs. So it's not that it's bad for you to eat meat or any animal food. Clearly, your diet should be mostly plant-based. You can add the animal food. And if you're going to cook it, try to see if you can do one of those so you can reduce the formation of AGEs. Okay. But really, I don't think the take-home message shouldn't be that you shouldn't eat meat from my talk. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you probably should reduce your processed foods, okay, in your diet if you're going to make a change. So we're going to move a bit about now, how do we fight inflammation? In addition to not doing too much of those, either AGEs or fructose or sugar, how do we fight it? What do we do in our diets that can help us? Just want to remind you that it's not only diet, exercise, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, anything that fights that fight or flight response, anything that brings you to that sort of like chill, the rest and digest, that's where you want to be. That will be helpful. And then avoidance of toxins. The reason I have this picture here is not because of the egg, it's because of the frying pan. That's a non-stick frying pan that has something called Teflon, and Teflon is a toxin. And that has been linked to actually obesity. And actually was the grandmothers who had actually used this Teflon, their granddaughters actually had an increased risk of obesity. So it actually moved through generations. I want to talk about just two emulsifiers. So these are things that we put in sauces or in even in ice creams. They just make things a little more fluffy, if you wish. So there are two. This one is called carboxymethyl cellulose. Also goes by cellulose gum. And the other one is called polysorbate 80 or twin 80. Those you're actually gonna find in some of those, if you look at the label, some labels will have it. In animal studies, they've been linked to weight gain and inflammation, especially inflammation in the gut. So just something to be aware of when you look at labels, just make sure that they don't have any of those two emulsifiers in them. All right, sleep is also important. We're learning more and more about how when we sleep, we actually decrease inflammation. There's actually almost a lymphatic system of the brain that actually clears toxins from the brain when we sleep. So don't take it for granted. Sleep is really important. All right, so let's move to talk about foods. All right, so a bit more about lowering your fructose intake. This was a study where they took kids who were obese, who were consuming about over 50 grams of fructose per day. And the way they were doing that was drinking about 1 liter of fruit juice or soft drinks per day. So they put these kids on a no fruit juice, no soda, just for 10 days. And after 10 days, they didn't have as much fat in their liver, and they didn't have as much fat around their bellies. And again, it's because fructose, as I said before, is gonna stimulate fat formation. Just 10 days, that's what it took. Pretty impressive, right? So again, I'm talking about these source of fructose right on the right side. If you're really concerned about things you eat that are, fruits that can have fructose, you have this graph over here. And when you see is from the bottom to top, you go up in fructose, and from left to right, you go up in fiber. So you want to be here. That's what you want to choose. Things that are high in fiber, lower in fructose. All right, you don't want to be sort of up here. And again, this is natural foods that haven't included any of these cookies or anything like that. We know those will be like, off the chart, most likely. Okay, so if you're concerned, you'll keep your, blackberries, raspberries, avocados, right? So within the fruits, there are different categories of how much fructose they have. And of course, also depends on the amount. Not the same to have 1 grape than to have, 100 grapes, right? I want to talk about polyphenols. Polyphenols, just think of the word as meaning plant pigments. So polyphenols are a large family of these plant-derived compounds. They have very different chemical structures, but they're all natural anti-inflammatories. There's a huge classification of polyphenols, and instead of just reading them, I'm just going to show you. So polyphenols are classified as phenolic acids, and you have different foods that have them. Still beans, the biggest one that people recognize is probably resveratrol, which you find in nuts, the skin of grapes and berries, as well as in wine. Lignans, which are in flax seeds, as well as other foods. And then within the flavonoids, which is probably the biggest group, there are other subcategories. And then you see them all here, right? So, it almost doesn't matter where you look. You're going to find almost every single kind of plant that you can think of in one of these, meeting one of these categories, or sometimes more than one, right? So berries not only have anthocyanins, they also have these still beans, right? So they have more than one kind of polyphenol, which is actually even better. How do polyphenols work? How do they lower inflammation? Well, when we take our polyphenols into our gut, we're already decreasing the absorption of carbohydrates. So you're not absorbing as many sugars as you would otherwise when you have polyphenols. In addition, some of them end up helping you modulate your gut microbiome, your gut flora. Okay, so they're a second benefit. Once they get absorbed, once you absorb it into your gut, and a lot of them don't get absorbed. As you can see, only 1 to 2% get absorbed, which we'll talk a bit about later, how you actually have to consume quite a bit of them and often. But once you absorb them, they work at the muscle level, so they lower inflammation in the muscle. They actually allow your muscle to take glucose a little bit better. They lower inflammation at the fat level, these adipocytes, which are your fat cells. So they lower inflammation. They lower inflammation in the pancreas. That's what decreased oxidative stress means. They lower inflammation. And they actually increase the production of insulin in your pancreas. And insulin is what then helps you metabolize sugar better. In your liver, they also lower inflammation, and they actually improve how your liver metabolizes sugar. So they have a number of areas where they work, and in each one of them, they're lowering inflammation. So what do we know about polyphenols? Do we have research? And the answer is yes, we have lots of research. We know that diets that have the highest amount of polyphenols will have the lower amount of inflammation. They also lower insulin resistance. And if you know, insulin resistance is a precursor to diabetes. They also improve this fatty liver that we talked about. Now, there's a difference whether you take nothing or you take 4 portions per day, okay? The more of these anthocyanins, what type of polyphenol, the lower your risk of diabetes is. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky. Polyphenols get clear very quickly, so you have to consume them every day, and you have to consume them often so that you can continue to keep those concentrations in the blood high. Where do you find them? Let's go through that again. So green tea have something called flavonols, and these are something called catechins. Citrus fruits, so oranges or lemons, will have these flavonols, and one of them is called hesperidin, and that lowers inflammation. Peppermint, peppermint tea, peppermint in your couscous, I guess, or any other dish. Also has anti-inflammatory polyphenols that are great for metabolic syndrome, this other precursor to diabetes. Grapes, berries, nuts, they have resveratrol that improves fatty liver. Your kale, your onions, broccoli, apples, berries have something called quercetin, which some people take as a supplement to help them prevent allergies. Blueberries, hibiscus, ginkgo, they also have other polyphenols. Olive oil, turmeric, ginger, rosemary, black pepper, and I could go on and on and on. Any plant food is gonna have polyphenols. The darker the color, the more polyphenols they'll have. So this is one kind of polyphenols called flavonoids, and these are the ones that you find in, give this red, purple, blue color, but also the sort of orangey color. So when people have the highest amount of flavonoid compared to the ones who have the lowest, the people with the highest have lower insulin resistance, so again, lower chance of diabetes and lower inflammation. And again, you find it in oranges, wine, peppers, celery, parsley, apples, but also in your berries, red bell peppers, your red cabbage, your grapes. I thought it was really interesting when I read this study years ago. 1 portion of flavonoid-rich foods will lower your blood sugar and will lower your blood pressure. And 1 portion will be the same as if you were to walk for 1 full hour. That's very impressive, right? Just 1 portion of those flavonoids. Any one of them, just pick. So, it almost doesn't matter which one you pick, which one you like, which ones you mix. And I think the more the better. The greater the variety, probably the lower your inflammation is going to be. There's a researcher who thinks that we do better when we aim for 50 different kinds of plant-based foods per week, 50. Now he says, if you have a red bell pepper and a green bell pepper and an orange bell pepper and a yellow bell pepper, it counts as 4. So, when I go to the store now, I don't buy just red bell peppers. I'll buy one of each kind, and I increase my polyphenols. Okay, so mix and match as many as you can. They all have benefits: liver, sugar, fat deposition, inflammation. All right, I'm gonna move on to fiber. Now, fiber is another part of our food, mostly in plants, of course, that will lower inflammation. It also lowers your risk of death. It improves cholesterol. It improves blood pressure. There are different kinds of fiber. We call some of them soluble or fermentable. Those have been shown to improve gut health, but also improve your immune system. And it's because they work as something we call prebiotics. So prebiotics is, as David Winson likes to say, is your miracle grow for your gut flora. Right? Is what you're feeding your gut to then create good gut flora. So that's what one of the things that fiber does. But it also works at lowering your LDL, improves weight, improves insulin sensitivity. As a woman, I need 25 grams of fiber per day. For a man, it's 30 grams of fiber per day. If you're a woman who's trying to lose weight, you need 30. Okay, that, as I say, is a full-time job. It's a lot of fiber. It's a lot of, food. Okay, and there are many different graphs and different tables of fiber. I've created one. I didn't put it here, but if you're interested, I can always send you mine. This is the fermentable or soluble fiber, the one that helps lower inflammation and acts as a prebiotic. And this is all the foods you find it in. So again, if you're somebody who cannot tolerate barley because you're gluten-free, you can still do avocados. You can do Brussels sprouts. If you cannot do beans because that doesn't work for you, you can probably work on berries or doing all these different vegetables. So there are many different sources of soluble fiber that you can incorporate into your diet. I'm going to move on to magnesium. Why magnesium? Well, we know that people who have either insulin resistance or diabetes, they have low magnesium. When we take magnesium, that lowers our inflammation. These are inflammatory markers or chemicals called cytokines. When people have higher amount of magnesium, they also have lower inflammation, lower insulin resistance, better blood pressure, better blood glucose. Now, if I haven't convinced you yet, I'll tell you that magnesium is important in over 300 chemical reactions in your body. It's huge. What are your magnesium-rich foods? So green leafy vegetables, we all, everybody talks about spinach. Well, kale has a little bit more magnesium than spinach, but both will do. Chard, pretty much all your dark green leafy vegetables will have some magnesium. Actually, chard has more than spinach, sorry, not kale, chard does. Nuts, almonds are big in magnesium, so that are cashews, seeds, especially pumpkin seeds, legumes, whole grains, avocado, and even salmon has magnesium as well. So again, you can choose how you want to bring magnesium into your body. What is not clear is whether if you take a supplement of magnesium, that will give you the same benefits. In addition, I can tell you that dietary magnesium is always safe, but if you have kidney disease or you're somebody who's on dialysis, you shouldn't supplement with magnesium. Magnesium gets cleared through your kidneys. If you take a magnesium supplement and you have kidney dysfunction, you might not be able to clear it, and then magnesium will be harmful to your heart. It can cause actually arrhythmias in the heart. So don't take a supplement if you don't know if you have kidney disease, okay? Let's talk about omega-3 fatty acids. There's definitely data for omega-3s supporting a link to lower risk of Alzheimer's, also of macular degeneration, cancer, and they also lower inflammation in patients who have rheumatoid arthritis. There's also data patients have just osteoarthritis, the old wear and tear arthritis. Omega-3 fatty acids also have data that it improves their arthritis. And whether you choose, cold water fish or seafood, or whether you choose seeds and nuts, or even your grass-fed meats, which have a higher amount of omega-3s, or eggs, or even some of your, vegetarian options or vegan options, that's, they all give you omega-3 fatty acids. A little bit different, each one of them. So I put together this list of the different foods that give you omega-3s. And the thought is that ideally, you want to get 2 grams per day of omega-3s in order to lower inflammation. That at least is the data we have for osteoarthritis, probably for rheumatoid arthritis and other conditions. So 2 grams a day. So, with salmon, you pretty much get to that, close to that, right? Whether it's the farm or the wild. Sardines probably don't give you that much. Mackerel doesn't either. Again, they're good sources, but you have to consume a bit more of them, or you can combine them with having a bit of fish, maybe a little bit of your flax seeds. They have different kinds of omega-3 in the body. This is the ALA versus DHA or EPA, which are your animal fatty acids. This is where you don't find those DHA or EPA into your vegetable sources of omega-3s. I want to talk a bit about herbs and wild plants. Herbs have polyphenols. They're full of polyphenols. And that's part of why they're so, anti-inflammatory. If you think of herbs or anything that is wild, we haven't really hybridized them to make them sweeter. We like their taste. We like the herbs because they have a lot of flavor. So we don't change that flavor, which means that they conserve all those natural anti-inflammatories in them. If you think of blueberries, for instance, these are your cultivated blueberries. You see how big they are. And on the left, you see the wild blueberries. You see how small they are. So your wild blueberries are higher in fiber. They have more of the skin, right? They actually give you about 2 times what regular blueberries will give you. They're smaller, so they have more skin, more on the antioxidant. That's where this antioxidant is, on the skin, right? They have less pulp, so they have less fructose. So if you look at a cup of frozen blueberries, and wild blueberries are very, very tender. So many times, unless you go to a farm that has them and you can pick them in the day, you're not going to find them in stores unless you find them frozen, because they're so tender that they will not usually stay for long. So they get actually frozen, and you'll find them frozen. So a cup of frozen blueberries gives you about 5 grams of fructose, but it's 8 grams in the ones that are so big, right? So it's an example of just one fruit, but I think it's true of almost anything that is wild, or anything that has that, any spices. They keep all those antioxidants with them. So when you can, if you have somebody who can take you foraging, or you have a farmer that you can work with, or one of those CSAs, and they have, lamb's quarters, or they have runs, or they have anything that is wild, you're going to get many more of those anti-inflammatories. They're going to be packed more than your cultivated, lettuce or, whatever else. So that's what it's important to put any of this in your food. It'll give you more of that punch. So to conclude, there are many ways that you can actually decrease inflammation in your body. So again, sleep is important. Any diet that is lower in carbohydrates and is higher in fiber is going to lower your weight, and it's going to improve markers of inflammation. I didn't talk much about anything about markers of inflammation. There are some that are not perfect, and that's why I didn't include them in the talk. Can you measure inflammation in your body? Yes, you can, but it's not a perfect test. So there's a test called CRP, especially the high sensitive CRP, high sensitive C reactive protein. It's a marker of actually intracellular inflammation. But again, it's not perfect. Keep active, exercise. As I said, there's no one specific marker for inflammation. And just think of filling your plate and your mind with anything that is anti-inflammatory. So in your plate, just put your omega-3s, all your polyphenols, all that rainbow of colors of anything that is plant-based. Fiber, if you can tolerate it. Some people can't. So if that's you, then you'll use other things that are not as high in fiber. So whatever works for you, just use it and do it every day. Thank you.
Wow, that's I need to run to the grocery store. This was really, really helpful in just understanding what are the benefits of there's just food that we should be eating more of, and that should is not a good word, but also just understanding what the variety we all hear about, eating the rainbow, and this is just reinforcing that. Is monk fruit an acceptable substitute for sugar? Diana Frost.
I think it's probably better. I'm gonna say I think it is. Yeah.
Okay.
It has fructose, so that just like honey, it will have fructose. I actually haven't looked at see how much fructose in monk fruit. I'm sure you can do a little Google search and figure out. I think everything is moderation, right? If you're having a bit of monk fruit and then you're having a cake and then you're having a cookie and then you're having I'm sure you're not asking that, and I'm sure you're not doing that, but is that, right? So a bit of monk fruit, I don't think is a problem, and I think it's reasonable.
Jerry LaPlaca, can you speak to the intake of cruciferous veggies when you are watching your thyroid levels?
Oh, you missed my talk on thyroid. I'm going to send you back to that. Just joking. So cruciferous vegetables are great for you. So they have a bad rep because they are part of what we call goitrogenic foods. So goitrogenic means that it creates a goiter, meaning your thyroid becomes big. And by default, people then say, well, if it makes a goiter, then it's going to make your thyroid be off. Well, it doesn't create a goiter. They will not create a goiter. What's the data? The data is that you need to have a lot of cruciferous vegetables in your diet and have no iodine to create a goiter. What do I mean by a lot? I mean about 15 cups of raw cruciferous every day. Raw, 15 cups every day, and no iodine. That's when you get an issue with cruciferous vegetables. There are studies that support that. There are studies in the US in vegans trying to associate cruciferous with thyroid. There was no association. There are studies in Africa in areas where they actually have, they eat something called millet, which is a goitrogenic food. The only place where they got that was when people were eating 76% of their diet was millet and they had no iodine. The group that had 43% of the diet being millet with no iodine didn't get a goiter. So rest assured, not a problem, unless you're eating 15 cups of raw cruciferous every day and have no iodine. Hope that helps.
2 questions. How about the use of maple syrup, and is dark chocolate good for inflammation?
Yeah, I didn't talk about dark chocolate. It is. So cocoa is also full of antioxidants. So yes, any cocoa, you know, again, as long as it's not loaded with sugar, so dark chocolate tends to be not as loaded with sugar. Yes, the answer is yes, that's good for inflammation. Maple syrup, a bit of fructose, again, that's what you're getting in maple syrup. I think there are 2 parts to, or maybe 3, to anything that is a sweetener. One is how much you're taking. B, how processed is what you're taking. And C, is it artificial? Maybe it goes with A, right? So maple syrup is not artificial, it's natural. And if you have just a bit of maple syrup, I think it's perfectly fine.
Is scalp psoriasis related to inflammation?
Yes, it is. So I didn't say that, but any autoimmune condition has at the core some inflammation. So there are it's more than just what you eat. You know, there are probably some genes that get triggered. What exactly triggers them, we don't know for every single condition, but yet there's inflammation, absolutely.
We will be posting this video probably within about a week or so, and the previous one is already up on the website, and we will be sharing the slides. A couple of people asked that. Mm-hmm. Somebody had asked, how can we help our absorption?
In general? Absorption in general, you know, it depends on what you're absorbing. So if you're thinking of something like calcium, magnesium, iron, you probably need a bit of acidity in your stomach. If you don't have enough acid in your stomach, you're not going to absorb those very well. If you're talking about vitamin D or A, which are fat soluble, you need actually more fat to absorb them. So you want to make sure that your pancreas is working well and that you have something, you know, if somebody takes vitamin D with a glass of, you know, orange juice with a lot of fructose, the vitamin D will not get absorbed very well because there's no fat helping it go into your system. So you want to take your vitamin D with your eggs or your salmon or something or nuts that give you a bit more fat. But I'm not sure that was the question. So maybe you can re-ask it if that was not what you were asking, sorry.
Is dairy considered an inflammatory?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you know, pros and cons about dairy. I cannot tell you that it's inflammatory for everybody. My sense is that it's inflammatory for some people. So some people cannot tolerate dairy. You know, I think there's more to dairy than just dairy. You know, it's what the cows were fed, is what those cows, you know, those cows are just, is after being pregnant, they have some growth hormones in them. So I think it's probably not unreasonable to lower your dairy consumption. Can I tell you that there's studies showing that if you decrease dairy, you lower, there are some conditions for which it well. So eczema is one of them. Maybe type 1 diabetes is another one. So there are a couple of conditions that we know that dairy could be a trigger. But can I tell you for everybody? No, I cannot say that.
Let's see. Is kale bad for the thyroid? And somebody was also asking, if I eat only sea salt, how do I get iodine in my diet? I know you addressed that in detail in your
Yeah,
previous
I'll do a
talk.
little quick. So kale is part of your cruciferous vegetables. So it's the same answer as I gave before. Kale is part of the broccoli, cauliflower, that same family. So no, kale is fine as long as, again, 15 cups of raw kale per day and no iodine, that could be a problem. But I don't think anybody does that. If you only have salt, the ways that you get iodine in your system, in your body through food, is through seafood or saltwater fish, seaweeds, and of those, nori, which is what you wrap the sushi in, or when you buy those little packets that have those those little seaweed snacks, they call them, that's nori. Those have enough iodine. You have them every day, you'll be fine. There's also something called dulce, D-U-L-S-E, dulce flakes, something you can use instead of salt. That also gives you iodine. And the amount of iodine in dulce flakes is the same amount as you get in iodized salt. And everything else is a little bit tricky, because whether you have iodine in eggs or iodine in milk, it really depends on what the cows or the chickens were fed. So it's true of any other plant. You can have iodine in your soil, and you will not know that, whether the farmer has or doesn't. I mean, unless you know your farmer really well. So if you don't have any iodine through either saltwater fish or seafood, no iodized salt, none of the seaweeds, I think you're going to end up taking a multiple vitamin or an iodine that has about 150 micrograms, 150 mcgs of iodine. That's safe.
Let's see, are numeric and omega-3 supplements okay?
Oh, turmeric?
I think it's probably turmeric.
Okay. Yes, they are okay. So omega-3, I give my kid omega-3 supplements because he doesn't have enough fish, and I wish he did, but he doesn't. So I try. I really, really do try. But until I get there, he takes an omega-3 supplement. Turmeric, just be cautious. Turmeric can cause, as a supplement, it can cause gallbladder. It can trigger a gallbladder attack for those who have gallbladder issues. It can sometimes cause diarrhea in high doses, or for some people, and it can slow down stomach emptying. So if you're somebody who has a low stomach emptying, you probably will not do very well with turmeric. But except for that, you really have to get pretty high doses to have any problem with turmeric. So no, I think turmeric is great. If you can naturally take it as a tea or put in your food, that'd be even great, better.
Is all honey inflammatory?
Yeah, so that's what I didn't want you guys thinking that I was saying. Sorry. Okay, let me rephrase that. So honey has fructose. It doesn't have tons of fructose. It's not what you find in sodas. It's definitely not in diet sodas. It's not what you find in fruit juices. So a little bit of honey, it's okay. Again, it's just like having a tomato or having an orange. They all have fructose. It's not that fructose is bad for you. It's how much fructose we have in our diet today. And that's not because we're eating more honey than before. I think it's because we're eating more processed foods than we did, 40, 50, 60 years ago. So no, I don't think honey is by itself inflammatory. It's the amount.
Okay. How does wine, red wine or any wine fit in? Do I only drink Merlot? Is there something special about Merlot?
I actually don't know the answer to Merlot or not. They're probably something about the grapes, whether they have more resveratrol. They're probably something about it. I don't know. I haven't actually looked into that. Maybe I should. That'd be the next talk. Choose your wine for anti-inflammatory properties. So red wines have resveratrol. So the skin of grapes has resveratrol. Now, I've used resveratrol as a supplement for some of my patients. And I tell them, if you had to do this with wine, you will be drunk every day. So it gives you some resveratrol. It doesn't give you as much as a supplement would. So red wine, yes, I think it's anti-inflammatory. I think if you're keeping it to less than 1 per day as a woman, less than 2 for men, that's okay. If you're over that, you're probably pushing your liver to not work well. So then you're going into trouble.
Let's see. Somebody was asking about the proper dose of turmeric and omega supplements.
So turmeric, you're going to have a lot of different supplements for turmeric. Some will, mostly what you're going to find is that they'll tell you about how much curcumin, which is the sort of what they think is the active ingredient in turmeric. So there are many other ingredients. We just think that curcumin is the one that does what it does for turmeric. So usually, if you use, most of the supplement, you'll see be about 500 milligrams of curcumin or in the turmeric extract or the turmeric compound or supplement. You need about 1,500 milligrams per day for many anti-inflammatory effects. I think if you took only 500, probably will do very little. 1,000 probably will do some. 1,500 is a good dose. Okay. And what was omega-3? So omega-3 is what I said was 2 grams per day for anti-inflammatory effects. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're just looking for a bit of anti-inflammatory, 2 grams is fine. I didn't say it, but omega-3 is also lower, something called triglycerides. It's a type of fat. So for that, you might need a higher dose, even perhaps 4 grams per day. Many people work between 2 to 4 grams is what usually what they'll use for anti-inflammatory effect.
Okay. Do you have a favorite fiber food?
So I grew up in Spain. I'm from Spain. So I love lentils. That to me is, I love them. And they actually pack a lot of fiber. That's one. And that gives you you probably get 7 grams of fiber per half a cup. So that's a pretty nice amount of fiber. Beans are around the same. I love sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes. That's my other favorite food I love artichokes, and sunchokes are just, in the winter it's just, roasted or in soups. It's just delicious. I like avocados, don't love them. Avocados actually give you a lot of fiber. They have 13 grams of fiber per avocado. So that's pretty big. You already have, your amount if you're a woman. So yeah, those are perhaps my 3 favorite.
Okay. I think we've reached the end of our questions. Everybody had some great questions, and thank you for sharing. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As I said, this will be posted up on our website, and you will receive a notice when it has been uploaded. And I will also be sending out, or actually Nancy will be sending out the slides from the presentation. But this has been wonderful, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which do you happen to, I don't happen to have that date, but it's on our website.
Another week or 2.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And everybody, share with everybody that these are available to watch on the website if they are unable to join us live in person. And I like the idea of maybe the pick your wine one.
There you go.
Or maybe just, like bring a salad. Everybody needs to bring a salad. So the more colorful, the better. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Benito. This is, as usual, just been so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will hopefully see you all soon.